Hi, my name is Bob Beechell, and in the second of two videos I'm going to continue looking at how to use the Tidyverse for working with datasets and doing data analysis. A couple more things that you can do with your data in the Tidyverse is firstly to create new variables from existing ones and also summarize the data. So looking at firstly how to create new variables, the command for this, the function is mutate. Now the syntax again is straightforward. We have the word mutate, then in brackets, first of all the tibble containing the data, comma, and then an expression to create a new variable. And as you can see, what you put is the name of the new variable, equals, and then some expression which creates that new variable based on an existing one. So here I'm creating a new variable which squares the values in the usage HPW variable. So if we run that, you'll see this variable created. There it is. We now have a tibble with 4 variables with this additional variable now, USG SQD, usage squared, where each variable is being squared. Each value, I should say. So as you can see, that's very straightforward. Of course, once again, this function returns a tibble. It doesn't change prac_tb, it returns a new tibble, which you would need to assign to a variable if you want to use it. Another example here shows how to create a logical vector, a vector with values true or false. So here, again, the same usage. This time, however, I'm creating a new variable called big usage. Now this will be equal to true if the value in usage HPW is greater than 30, and obviously false if it's not. So you can see how to do this. New variable name equals, and then some condition here, which will be evaluated. So running this, again, as you can see, we now get this variable big usage, which is a logical variable, as you can see, LGL, containing true or false. So as you can see, it's very easy to create new variables from existing ones to augment your data set. Now another main thing that you often want to do, of course, having got a data set, is to summarize it in various ways, in particular via frequency distributions or cross tabulations. Now that's easily enough done in using the Tidyverse commands. Then there are three basic commands here which are useful. The first one is group_by. Now this is the function you use to actually create the groupings that you want. Of itself, it doesn't actually do the summarizing or create the frequency distribution, but it prepares it. It states how you're going to do the grouping. You store that grouping in a particular variable, which you then use in either the count function, if you simply want to count the number of values in each group, or for more sophisticated groupings, you use the summarize command. So let me illustrate how to use this. So first of all, I want to do a simple frequency count of the gender values to see how many are men and how many are male in my data set of 20 values. So to do that, I first of all use group_by. Here, and you can see you put prac_tb, of course, the tibble, comma, and then you tell it which variable you want to group by, in this case simply gender. So I run that. Now that, as I say, doesn't actually create the frequency as yet, it's simply preparing the ground. If I then want to create the actual frequency table, then I can use the function command on that grouping. Frequency, as you can see, that's the grouping name, and as you'll see, that gives us what I want, a frequency distribution. It's a tibble again, showing the distribution according to female. So there's 9 in my data set of 20, 9 are female and 11 are male. Obviously I can do that with the other variable site, so as you can see, it's the same thing. First of all, use group_by to create that grouping by site. Then you put that grouping into the count function, and there we have it. Now we have got the frequency distribution by site. So of the 20 cases, 7 Facebook, 5 Pinterest, and 8 Twitter, which is the 20, of course. Now that's just for a simple frequency distribution. What we want to do often, however, is to look at a grouping by 2 variables, what's often called a cross-tabulation. Again, that's very easily done in essentially the same way, but this time I create a grouping by those 2 variables, not just one. So again, the syntax is clear: group underscore by brackets practb, the tibble, then in commas, separated by commas, the variables you want to group by, in this case gender and site. So creating that grouping, I can then use that grouping in the count function. And as you can see, that gives me a grouping by gender and site. So there were 3 females who used Facebook, 3 females who used Pinterest, and so on. Obviously these will add up to 20 again. Now, let's say this is effectively what's often called a cross-tabulation. However, it's not printed in that way as, say, gender down the side and site along the top. The Tidyverse tibbles are always presented in column format like this. That enables them to be used in the graphing package ggplot, which I'll mention briefly shortly. Now, for a more sophisticated use of the grouping, you can use the summarize command. So here what I'm doing is I'm using this grouping I've just created, grp, which groups by gender and site, which I'm putting into the summarize command, as you can see. But then I'm actually creating a new variable called average use, which is the mean of the values in usage HPW. So what this does, I think you can see, it will show within each of these 6 groupings here, it will calculate the average usage per hour. So it will take the 3 values of usage in this particular group and find the mean, and the mean of those 3, and the mean of those 3, and so on. So as I think you can see here, therefore, you could create other summary variables, not just the mean. You could maybe do the median or the standard deviation or whatever. So let me run that and you'll see what we get. And there we have it. So with this time, the same groupings, of course, gender and site, but this time it's averaged the hourly usage values within those particular groups. So as you can see, summarizing is very easy and powerful. There is lots more you can do with it. There are other commands here that you can look at in the Tidyverse. Remember, these are all available in the help system. For example, if you want to look at the help for summarize, and of course the easiest way is to simply to put the cursor on the function and press the F1 function key, which of course brings up the help for this command, summarize, which reduces multiple values down to a single value, as you can see in effect. And there's all the help that you need. Now, as I mentioned, one of the reasons why a tibble is in this format here, columns, is that enables it then to be used with ggplot. Now, ggplot is the graphing package which comes as part of the Tidyverse. I will be doing some tutorials on ggplot in detail, but here I just want to show you one of the ways it can be used in the Tidyverse. So what I'm going to do is to plot this data here, which is okay in a table, but looks much nicer in a bar chart, a grouped bar chart. Now, to do this, I'm going to rerun this command, but this time I'm actually going to store the tibble that it returns in a variable, so I can use that in the ggplot function here. So running this again, because this won't plot, I should display the tibble this time because it's stored in a variable, but obviously if I display that variable, you'll see that it's exactly the same. Of course, I've called it mean usage. Now if I run ggplot on this tibble, specifying the x variable to be site, the y variable to have use, and the other way of showing the categorizing the results as gender. I'll explain in the tutorial on ggplot what this does. I'm going to draw a bar chart, and you need various options for that. Again, I'll be going into detail on this. Let's run it and we'll see that we get a nice, very nice looking graph. Just takes a few moments to calculate and do the drawing, depending on the speed of your machine. Here we are. As you can see, a very, very nice graph, a nice background. These are the default colors which you can change. I did specify the border here with this option, color equals black. Notice that let me just increase the size of this. So as you can see, it's shown this breakdown of average usage by site and by gender. Site is along the x-axis as I specified, and by telling it to fill using gender, what that effectively does means it then shows the two bars distinguished by gender, and also puts a nice legend for you automatically. Now this still needs a bit of work on it to have a title and a better y-axis, but that's easily enough done. But as you can see, ggplot does produce by default some very nice looking graphs, and in fact you can easily format it in many ways to make it even better. If you want, you can change the colors, change the scale, and so on. Okay, one final thing I want to show you here is how to create factors. Remember, we saw in the previous video that when you import data into a tibble, character vectors are not automatically converted into factors, which they are with the built-in read.csv function. The Tidyverse version read_csv does not turn them into factors because there's no need. As you see, all the commands work fine, including the summarizing and the drawing. But if you did want to turn them into factors, there are two ways you can do that. One is to first of all read the data in to a tibble using the read_csv function as we did before, and then use the mutate function to turn any character vectors in the dataset into factors using this parse_factor function here. So let me show how to do that. So first of all, I'll read the data in as before, this time into a different table, of course, called mydat. And that, of course, keeps them as character vectors. If I then use mutate on mydat, specifying that gender must be passed to a factor and site must be passed to a factor, you can see the syntax here. That will turn those two variables into factors and store it in mydat1. If I now display that, you'll see that they are indeed now factors rather than character vectors. The other way you can do it, which is quicker and easier if you don't have too many variables, is to do it upon import. So what you do here is you use read_csv as before to read it into a tibble, and then you specify this option call_types, and you put call_types equals, and then inverted commas, you specify the data types of the variables in the same order as they are in the data set from left to right. So here we've got gender, site, and usage. I want gender and site to be factors, hence the F, and of course usage to be double. So that will give me exactly what I had here. Now, of course, this would be perhaps a little tedious if you had 20, 30 or more variables having to specify each one. I'm not sure, but I think it could be that if you don't specify any, it will just use default, but I'm not sure on that. You'd have to check that in the help system. It could be that if you have 20 variables, then you do need to put 20 characters here to specify each one, but maybe not. But of course, with fairly limited variables, as I've got here, it's pretty quick. So if I run that, it's in MyDat2, and then display that, exactly the same. These are now factors. So that completes looking at these two tutorials on using the Tidyverse in R. Now if you want more information, simply go to the Tidyverse homepage at tidyverse.org, and there you can find more information about the separate packages which make up the Tidyverse. And also you'll find on there a link to an online text by Hadley Wickham called R for Data Science, which shows how to use the Tidyverse approach to carry out data analysis. It's a very good book, it's free, it's online, and it's well worth looking at.